Yes. Yeah, she's a cutie. Very headstrong, but she's a good girl. So Poppy's an old bird.
You're an old bird?
Yes, their lifespan could be 30 to 40 years.
Okay, so I'm here today with Bob and Jill of Northeast Avian Rescue, also called NEAR, which is in East Greenbush, New York. And if you can hear, there's lots of squawking and chirping and tweeting going on in the background. These lovely people are the proprietors and owners of this beautiful rescue service, and I want them to tell us about their story. So, Bob, can you tell us how you came to run and operate this particular rescue service?
Yeah, so how did we get into the rescue? When we moved to this house in 2011, we had about 10 birds, small to large, from cockatiels to macaws. And we decided we thought we'd like to have a couple more cockatiels. And we went to a local organization and adopted 4 cockatiels. And they kind of hoodwinked us into joining up with them and working with them at the rescue. We got their organization off the ground. It was just starting at the time. But we found early on that they wanted to maintain a very small footprint, and we wanted to expand the services and to be able to provide some good throughout all of the Northeast, or at least any place where they would have us. And those led to some irreconcilable differences and ultimately to divorce, and we went our way and they went their way. And really since day one in October of 2013, we have been just expanding on a daily basis.
Okay, so it sounds like you made the right decision on behalf of the birds. And Jill, you were telling me that you're recently retired so that you can be here a lot to take care of the birds on a daily basis.
Yes, I recently retired from New York State, and I spend all my time now taking care of the birds, taking intakes, surrenders, and do some adoptions. But most of it is just day-to-day operations, cleaning, feeding, watering, providing enrichment for each of them, trying to just give them all attention. And it takes my whole day just to take care of them all.
Wow, that's amazing. So getting back to the cleaning, how many hours would you say you spend a week trying to keep the birds' cages clean?
I personally wouldn't say it's all me. We have a lot of volunteers who come in.
That's excellent. How many volunteers do you have?
I'd say probably 30 or more at this time. They come and go, but we have a very dedicated group of volunteers today.
Oh, that's awesome. So the volunteers come in and is it one per bird? Do the birds have to get to know them first, or how does that work?
No, actually, we have, we're open for any volunteers. We don't have age requirements as long as the parents are okay with it. So we have a lot of younger volunteers who come in. We let them work with birds that we know are social or safe to work with. I wouldn't put them with a cockatoo or a macaw. And other people, we have a lot of volunteers who come in, have no bird experience whatsoever. Others come in that have had birds in the past, can't have them right now. So this is their bird therapy. So they come in and help out and just love walking around, talking to them, singing to them, feeding, watering, change everything.
They own their birds vicariously through us at that.
Okay, so it's almost like you're their caretakers, and then they come and visit the birds.
Pretty much.
Okay. So what happens when someone calls you because they need to surrender a bird into your care? How does that work?
Well, first of all, it happens a lot.
How often is a lot, if I can ask?
We currently have about 350 birds in the house now. Now, they're not
350 birds in the house.
Yeah, they're not all macaws. They're not all big birds. We have at least 200 of those birds are small birds, parakeets, cockatiels, finches, and so forth. But they still take up an awful lot of space. They eat a lot of food. We get anywhere between 1 and 25 surrender requests a week, and we never know how that's going to work. Last week, one day, we had 5 surrender requests in the course of an hour. Some days we will have none. Some weeks we'll have none. And then it's everything explodes, and we're back to trying to figure out how we're going to fit all the birds into the cages that we have. So when people call, we usually will guide them to our website, where we have a form that they fill out that gives all the information that we can get from them about the birds. We go all over the Northeast. Last weekend, we picked up 65 parakeets from a home in Connecticut. But on the way there, we picked up a cockatoo in New Jersey and dropped off a bird in Pennsylvania. So we travel quite a lot. But with regard to the surrenders, we encourage people to bring them into the shelter so that we can show them where the birds are going and kind of ease their mind about that transition period. But in many cases, people don't drive, or they can't get up here because of the distance or something of that nature. So we spend a lot of time on the road. What we're finding right now is that back in the 70s and 80s, it was open season on birds. There was no import bans. If you were a bird store owner and you wanted 100 birds, you'd get a hold of somebody in Central America. They would take them out of the nests, and soon you'd have 100 birds. They were cheap, they were plentiful, and there were no restrictions on them. So in the 70s and 80s, people who were in their 30s and 40s bought a lot of birds. Well, we fast forward now 30 or 40 years, those people are in their 70s or 80s, and now they're aging out. They're going into nursing homes. They're dying, and they can't keep their birds any longer.
And the birds are still living because a lot of them live for so long.
And the birds, which may be 30 years old, are young adults in many cases.
Right. That's amazing.
So we're getting a tremendous number of birds that are 25 to 50 years old that in many cases are not very well socialized, because generally as we age, we don't just find a day where we just can't do anything anymore. You go on a downhill, as it were, and over the course of times, the birds aren't handled as much as they used to be. They're not played with as much as they used to be, and they lose their socialization because at their heart, they're still wild animals. Right. And so we get a lot of really ugly, not very nice birds that we have to kind of coax that pet back out of them and try to rehabilitate them so that we can find them a new home. When that happens, something we're going through right now, we have a whole rescue full of very difficult birds. All the cages are filled, and we're at a stalemate. We can't bring new nice birds, potentially nice birds, into the rescue until we get the ugly, mean birds out of the rescue. And so we not only have a lot of birds, but we have a lot of birds that are very difficult to adopt. And so the surrenders can be a challenge. And if more come in than we can take, then we run into some real problems.
So when you say bring the pet back out in them, that kind of jumps out at me like this is a situation we've brought on ourselves in terms of exotic pets and something that maybe we didn't realize was going to happen because they do have such a long lifespan. What's the average age of the birds that you have here, of the bigger birds that live for a longer time?
Oh, I would say we have some. We have a cockatoo that's in her 60s. We've got another umbrella who's 50-some years old. We see a lot of senior birds coming in right now, but we also see a lot of them that, due to poor diet, living conditions, are not living anywhere near their lifespan that they should. They come in malnourished, vitamin deficient, because people aren't educated on proper diet of parrots, and they feed them seeds or, some cases, wild bird food, and it's not nutritionally complete. So every bird that comes in, we convert to a pelleted diet and supplement with fresh fruits and vegetables as much as possible to get them back into as good health as we can. But if you're talking decades of neglect with the diet, then you can't undo that damage. So we have a lot of them that have become hospice care, and we have some volunteers who are taking them. And other than that, we just provide them a good, safe environment and be as happy as they can be for what's left of their lives.
So I'm trying to get an idea of the scope of what's involved. If this particular rescue center located in New York, how many of and you have 350 birds, how many of similar size exist in this region and in New York State?
Of similar size rescues?
Correct.
There is another organization here in the capital region, the one that we came from, that is very small. They have maintained the small footprint. I should back up. Most rescues, doesn't matter what kind of animal, they have a central administrative organization, and then they rely on a network of foster families, foster homes.
So how many total birds do you think are there that have been surrendered and are in need of rescue in New York and in the country?
Tens of thousands.
Oh, I was hoping
question.
yeah.
I don't think that there is a reputable avian rescue that's not full.
And so the problem, and we were talking about this earlier, is because of the long lifespan, right?
Well, it's because of the long lifespan, but in many ways it's also because of people and their inability to make decisions through research and normal, reasonable thinking. Birds are very pretty. They're very, you see some of our birds, and when they talk and when they do cute things, people will tend to have a knee-jerk reaction and buy the birds as an impulse. And it's a 30, 40, 50-year impulse, and people don't realize that. And it's a very loud 50-year impulse.
Yeah.
And it's a very bitey 50-year impulse. And it's a very messy 50-year impulse. And if you let them out of their cage unsupervised, it's a damage your wood cabinets impulse. And so people realize very quickly they made the wrong decision, and they just want to get rid of the bird.
Okay, so you're saying that this problem could be helped if people were more informed in their decision making and knew everything that was involved in the care and feeding of a bird. Hello there.
Trying to make
Interview next.
obviously disagrees with something. Okay, there we go.
Okay. So people basically need to do their research
Absolutely.
before diving in.
Yes, they definitely need to do the research. These are not easy pets like a dog or a cat. And sadly, most of the birds go through at least 4 or 5 homes in their lifetime. We've had some surrendered that are been through 4 or 5 homes and they're only 5 years old. So it's people that just on impulse, I want a bird that talks, and they buy one, and then they find out that this particular one doesn't talk, or it bit me, so I don't want it anymore because it hates me, and none of that is true. So there's a lot of education that needs to happen before people would even consider going out and getting a bird. I mean, these poor animals are trying to recreate what they have in the wild, so trying to squeeze them into your lifestyle and your home is not an easy task.
There's one other aspect of this that is kind of controversial, but I think it bears mentioning. In the early 90s, many countries got together and they created a treaty that said we're not going to allow importation of exotic animals, birds, cats, exotic large cats and different types of animals into their countries anymore. It was called the CITES Treaty. And since the early 90s, it's been illegal to bring birds into this country from other countries. And that has largely, with smuggling aside, has largely stopped the importation of birds. However, the breeding of birds, just by taking and taking the birds in your possession and breeding them, has become a huge commercial business, and it's completely unregulated. It is being promoted by some very powerful lobbying groups, and there are birdie mills, like puppy mills, all over the world, specifically all over this country. And that's why you can go into PetSmart and see 30 parakeets for $10 a piece, that you can get any kind of birds you want at a relatively cheap price for most of them, because there's unfettered breeding at this point. And these birdie mills are flooding the market with birds that eventually are going to end up in rescues. So you have that, along with people aging out and people being irresponsible. They've just created like a tidal wave, like a snowball rolling downhill. And it just gets worse and worse all the time.
So what sorts of things could we do to, prevent the birdie mills from happening in the first place?
I think that that's going to take a lot of government intervention, and it's government intervention that the governing parties really are not terribly interested in. Every state has their heroes in conservation. In New York State, Jim Tedisco is a New York State senator who has a great impact on animal advocacy. But for the most part, there aren't a lot of people that go along with him unless there's something really egregious that happens that just kind of shakes the body of the Assembly and the Senate, the legislative body. They don't do much. So a lot of it is for people who are concerned to just beat on their local representatives to try to get this under control. But then a lot of it is just not, basically putting them out of business by not having a demand on their supply, by adopting rather than buying baby birds. But it's also a difficult message to get across.
Right. So if someone wanted to adopt a bird from you guys, what would they need to do?
Well, they could go to our website, and on the website there's an adoption application that they will fill out, and that gets submitted to us, and we have some volunteers who work on replying to those applications, scheduling people to come in. We require that people travel, however the distance, we don't care, as long as they're willing to come in here, meet some of the birds, see if there's a good fit for their family, their lifestyle, whatever, and we kind of gauge what bird would be good for them, not come in and say, I want that one. I'm more concerned about the birds than I am about the people being happy, so I want to make sure that's a good fit.
Right. So you kind of make sure that the bird is going to fit into their expectations, or they're going to adjust their expectations according to the needs of the bird,
And
or
the experience level that they have as well. Yeah.
an experience level.
Yes, we've got more people that come in and want a cockatoo or a macaw. They have no bird experience, or they've had parakeets. They live in an apartment. That's a sure way to get evicted. You can't have the large ones due to the noise levels in apartments. It just doesn't work. So we're conscientious about making sure we fit the right bird to the right person.
An umbrella cockatoo, for example, has a downward bite pressure that's very similar to an alligator. They have a huge amount of bite pressure. And an adult cockatoo can be very unpredictable. And if they don't like you, they can be downright dangerous. And you compound that by not understanding their body language and their psychology, if you will. It can be a very, very dangerous combination. So even though we do get some people that walk out of here with their noses out of joint a little bit, we really do advocate for the birds rather than for the people. And we want to make sure that when we make an adoption, that bird's going to stay adopted. Because part of our adoption agreement is that if you can't keep the bird for any reason, it has to come back to us. And we're more than happy to take a bird back if something happens that's unexpected. But when we adopt a bird out, we don't want to see that bird come back. We want it to have a lifetime of happiness with its new family. So part of that, a big part of that, is making sure that we match the birds with the right people.
So since October of 2013, how many adoptions have you successfully brokered?
Well over 1,000.
Woohoo! That's awesome. That's triple the number of birds you have in here right now. Yeah. So that's kind of good news, right?
Most years, we start the year we end the year right around the same number of birds that we started the year with. This is the first year when we just said it's never going to happen because, for instance, we probably have 150 parakeets here. People come in here, they want the bigger birds. They want the flashier birds. Maybe the birds that can talk, maybe the birds who can do tricks. I don't know. But the parakeets are kind of a little bit lower on the food chain, so to speak, when it comes to their popularity in a rescue. And we have so many more right now than we could possibly adopt, really easily. So we're going to end this year with significantly more birds than we started. But we still had a very good year for adoptions. Because you can't prove it by the number that are here right now.
Right. And how many birds did you adopt this year? Or successfully adopt just this year?
We usually tally the numbers up at the end of the year.
Okay.
Different organizations that ask for that information because they kind of keep track of it. I would say we're probably in the 150 to 200 area.
Okay.
We'd have to tally it up, but that's ballpark.
Yeah. Okay, so when I came in, you showed me a big stack of bird feed just to indicate exactly how much grub these gorgeous-sounding creatures consume. I want to, when I can, get the camera over on that. But how many pounds of bird seed, not including the fresh fruit, do you think you guys go through in a month?
Well, we don't buy bird seed. We buy pellets. Pelleted.
Okay, so you said you convert them to a pelleted diet. So that's no millet, no nothing, just pure.
There is millet in the pellets. But
Okay.
The pellets are an extruded, almost like dog kibble, but it has all of the added nutrition of vitamins and minerals and the recommended daily allowances of all those things, so the birds stay in top health. Then when you add when you add vegetables and fruits to their diet, it's more to give them something different in flavor and texture and something to play with. So the pellets are a really big deal. But we probably had 200, maybe a little bit more than 200 pounds of food.
There's a little over 200 that just came in. That'll last. That's 2 of the maybe 4 or 5 brands that we buy in sizes. So that'll last us probably a couple weeks. And then I'll be ordering again, because it seems like every time I turn around and I look at the shelf, I'm like, we've only got 2 bags of, medium large left. I better order some. We're going through a lot more food now because we have so many more birds.
Our food cost this year is going to be about $10,000 for the whole year. Maybe a little bit more.
$10,000.
And that's wholesale. So, if we were buying retail, it'd be a lot more than that.
It'd be almost double that.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, clearly what you guys do here is priceless in terms of helping the birds. And I want to end on a positive note. So if you could introduce me to your favorite bird, that would be great.
I don't know that we have a favorite, but we could introduce you to a bunch of our favorites.
Yes, please do. Okay, let's meet some birds.
Okay.